The rainforests of Indonesia, the last refuge of one of man's closest relatives, the orangutan. This orangutan's home is doomed, and when the patch of forest in which he lives has been felled, there will be nowhere for him to live or indeed to find a living. This magnificent animal is fighting for its very existence as more and more of its forest home is hacked away. The rainforests of Sumatra and Borneo, the only places where this ape now exists, are being chopped down at an incredible rate, usually for the timber, but sometimes to clear ground for rubber plantations and rice paddies. This big male senses that he has nowhere to go, and that the man with the axe waits for him and his kind at the base of every tree. He finds temporary refuge in a smaller tree, but that tree too is doomed. The name orangutan means man of the forest. Soon there may not be any forests left for the gentlest of all the great apes. "40 years ago, this part of northern Sumatra was covered with thick rainforest. Then came the timber boom. Japan was buying building timber in vast quantities. The axe and the chainsaw moved in to supply the market. The fact that the man of the forest, the orangutan, is being deprived of a home is only one aspect of a natural disaster. What the tree fellers are also doing is changing the climate in a way that could drastically affect their own lives. Rainforest like this actually creates the rains that fill the rivers, that irrigate the rice paddies, that feed the growing population. The gradual disappearance of the orangutan is perhaps a vision of our own future. The orang once occurred all over Southeast Asia. Today it's confined to forest areas in Borneo and Sumatra. Its best chance of survival is in the north of the Indonesian island of Sumatra in the Gunung Leuser reserve. This has 2 orang rehabilitation centers at Ketambe and Bahorok. The Gunung Leuser reserve, named after a mountain, covers 2,500 square miles. Just outside its boundaries, many of the trees have already gone. Inside the reserve, the undergrowth is impenetrable, a tangle of vines, ferns and bamboos. True jungle. The humidity is almost unbearable. A rainforest does exactly what its name suggests. It makes rain. Above the tangle at ground level, the trees often stand 150 feet tall. And in the trees live the men of the forest, the orangutans, the most arboreal of all the great apes. They're not at all at home on the ground. They're masters of the trapeze and high wire, even youngsters like this one. He's only about 3 years old. Although orangs appear to get fun out of such acrobatics, they've developed these amazing abilities in order to travel freely in the treetops. Making a tree sway in order to reach the next one is a standard procedure. They've even been seen to use a tool, a bent stick, to hook onto a tree that would otherwise remain just out of reach. Like the other great apes, the gorillas and chimpanzees, they're tailless. If gorillas are the ponderous heavyweights of the ape family and chimps the activists, then orangs are the good-natured pacifists. The great apes are our own closest relatives. Scientists say that the orangutans, Pongo pygmaeus, are the apes furthest from us, but there's still plenty about them we can recognize in ourselves. Perhaps their peaceful nature is due to the fact that orangs have so few enemies. An occasional clouded leopard may seize a youngster on the ground, but once in the trees, they're safe. They seem to be able to judge to the finest limits the strength of a creeper or branch that will bear them. Except on rare occasions. Orangs share very few domestic habits with their relations, the gorillas and the chimpanzees of Africa. But they do have this much in common. They build nests in the trees in which to spend the night. Orangs are loners. They never go around in large family parties. It's a miracle how a male ever finds a mate. His best efforts seem to lie in simply calling for one. Almost the only time 2 or 3 orangs are seen together is within a growing family. This immature youngster is still closely attached to its mother, who has another one, a very young baby, clinging to her breast. The larger of the 2 infants is about 3 years old. It'll soon be leaving its mother. She's still remarkably maternal towards it, even though the new baby must be taking most of her attention. The new arrival is quite helpless and can only cling. The 3-year-old will become fully independent in another year and sexually mature at 10. In the reserve, it may eventually live to the age of 30. Most days in the rainforest, there's a downpour, if only for a short period. In the rainy season, it's monotonously continuous. The orangutans have an answer to this. Their wiry hair does offer a certain amount of protection. But when this is not enough, they try other methods. In this reserve, there are around 2,000 orangs, a fifth of the world total of perhaps 10,000 in the wild. It's a tiny population at great risk. Although copying the technique of its forest-dwelling relatives, this orangutan is very much not in the wild. He's captive, one of many throughout Indonesia, but nevertheless a potential recruit for the dwindling army of the wild ones in the forest. His days of captivity are over. At Bohorok Rehabilitation Center, they're training captive orangs to become wild again. Monica Borner and Regina Fry are two Swiss rehabilitation specialists who run Bohorok Station. Part of their job is to talk the owners of captive orangs into giving up their pets. This ape belongs to the crew of an oil drilling rig. For 40 years, it's been illegal to kill, capture, keep in captivity, or sell an orangutan. But no one has taken much notice of this law until recently. The oil crew got this orang as a baby. Now it has grown too big for comfort. Monica Borner did not even have to persuade them to give it up once they heard of the work of Bohorok Station. Though it's been kept chained up, it's in relatively good condition, both physically and mentally. Many orangs that have been kept in small cages or even boxes suffer depressions and complexes that are similar to human mental illnesses. This orang obviously hasn't been shut up. It's ready to go into the box in which it will travel to Bohorok without excessive persuasion. Now it will learn to become a free-living orangutan. One of the problems that the Swiss scientists face is that many illegal orangs are kept as status symbols by high Indonesian officials. General Medelu, police chief for northern Sumatra, saw it as a question of setting an example when he gave up not only a 10-year-old female, but also a youngster from his private collection. While orangutans do quite well in captivity, this is no place for them if they can be free. Nowadays, even the world zoos have agreed not to take any more orangs from the wild. There are already enough in zoos to breed from. In the 3 years that they've been running Bohorok, Monica and Regina have rounded up over 50 orangs. Sometimes negotiations take weeks before they're able to drive away with another candidate for rehabilitation. They make it a rule never to pay, never to bribe, seldom to prosecute, except in the case of dealers who can sell a young orang for as much as £300 on the black market. Sometimes they have a lucky break. Monica spotted this cage in a garden while driving past. It contained a very young baby. The owner of the house had only just moved in. Orang and cage came with the property. He was very happy to hand over the baby, a female less than a year old. She was eventually named Mo for Monica. People find baby orangs irresistible. It's when they grow up that the owners grow tired of their pets, a situation by no means confined to Indonesia. Monica Borner would be the last to claim that she and Regina Fry are the only ones to round up illegal captives. These are wardens of PPA, Indonesia's increasingly active conservation organization. Many of the rescued orangs have been brought to Bohorok by their efforts. This is Suka, and he's 3 years old. Anyone who has worked with orangs soon discovers that they're all individual characters. It's a mile walk from the end of the road to the edge of the forest reserve. The turbulent Bohorok River marks the boundary. The two Swiss scientists are at the landing place to meet the PPA men with their new deliveries. Regina Fry is the first to greet Suka, then Monica Borner. Funds for Bohorok Rehabilitation Center are provided by the Frankfurt Zoological Society. It's also backed by the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and much further support comes from the Indonesian government. The center consists of 2 wooden huts, which the 2 girls designed and built with local timber and labor when they first arrived. This is the ranger post. Next door are the quarantine cages. At first it must seem that the new arrivals have merely exchanged one prison for another. But a 4 to 6 weeks quarantine period is essential. The orangs have been in contact with human beings and exposed to all the germs that afflict them. Orangutans can catch our diseases, including tuberculosis, pneumonia, and even polio. When allowed to roam freely in the forest, these could easily spread to the wild population. This handsome male, named Lubis, has already served most of his time in quarantine. The cages may appear unnecessarily strong, but orangs can escape from pretty well anywhere once they've put their mind to it. They're even capable of using wooden planks as levers. They're very strong, but almost invariably gentle. Although these rehabilitation candidates seem to love human contact, they will soon have to learn to do without it. So for the present, they must remain behind bars as a first step towards living wild in the forests. Little Mo is so small she spends the night in a basket in the girls' living hut. The infants are always a problem. Mo, fortunately, is a healthy baby. Regina takes her into the forest for a climbing lesson. Sometimes the young orangs reach Bohorok in very poor shape. Monica nursed this one back to full health, only to see it die later, quite unexpectedly, of pneumonia. It seems ridiculous to have to teach even a very young orang how to climb. The instinct is born in them. But in captivity, their opportunities are so restricted, or they become so dependent on their owners, that they're often unwilling to try. Less than 1 year old, Mo is a very good climber. At first, the 3-year-old Suka was just the opposite. When Monica took him into the forest, he clung tightly to her. When she put him in a tree, he seemed terrified. He scuttled along the ground more like a young gorilla than an orangutan. Suka knew how to climb perfectly well, but much preferred the protection and reassurance Monica gave him. With further training, this situation was to change very soon. After new arrivals are put into the quarantine cages, vaccinations are given. They're rewarded with slices of sweet pawpaw. They're extraordinarily cooperative creatures, making little fuss about their polio and TB jabs. Occasionally, the girls have to seek outside medical help for their charges. They're zoologists, not vets, and a broken jaw calls for skilled surgery. This visit was the result of a curious incident. One day, the young orang Purba kept urging Regina to follow him down a certain forest path. When she finally did so, she found this ape, Olib, lying beneath a tree. Purba and Olib were close companions, and Olib had been missing for nearly 24 hours. He'd fallen out of a tree. His jaw was smashed. Regina took him to the doctor on a large rubber plantation some distance away. Olib submitted quietly to having his jaw x-rayed. Then clips were put in. Six weeks later, Regina brought him back to the surgery. He lay down quietly, without so much as a cry or a bite, to have the clips taken out. No anesthetic was needed. Olib was as good as new and was soon climbing his way towards freedom again. When handling such endearing animals, Monica and Regina must constantly remind themselves that their task is to free the orangs of human dependence as quickly as possible. And as we shall see, that can be a highly complicated task. There are always about 20 orangutans at Bohorok Rehabilitation Center learning to be wild apes again. All but the very young live in the forest all day. In mid-afternoon, they come swinging in from all directions. Their objective is the feeding station, a series of cages, some with flat roofs, built in a clearing on a hilltop 400 feet above the scientists' living hut. Either Monica or Regina attends each feeding session so they can observe each orang's progress. Punctuality for meals is not looked for. In fact, it's a good sign if an orang turns up late. It tends to show less dependence on a free handout. Curious personality traits show up at the feeding station. These two are the same unusually dark color. They're not twins, they're not even related. but they're always together, even in the forest. There's always milk, especially for the younger ones. This doesn't stop the bigger orangs from muscling in. In the general free-for-all, there's always one youngster that feels it's been cheated. This is Olib, the one who broke his jaw. His friend's gesture looks like sympathy, but it's more likely to be inspired by curiosity and a wish to play. Sometimes the rangers bring the milk in bottles to prevent the orang stealing it. It doesn't stop them trying. It's a pretty chaotic meal, but there's never any bad-tempered fighting. All the young get their share of milk before the second course is dished out. Today, Regina's on duty. She lets Suka out of his cage beneath the feeding platform. Suka is still too inexperienced to be allowed to roam freely in the forest all day. He just comes out at meal times. Suka has come a long way since the first few days when he refused to climb. The ape now drinking had been kept shut up in a large box by her captors. As a result, she has become emotionally disturbed and will probably never be self-reliant enough to return to the forest. She sits always alone. There's no doubt Suka will make it back to the forest. His present boisterous personality will probably change. Regina has seen extrovert youngsters like Suka before. In a year or two, they settle down. With young orangs, a foster-mother relationship is very important, but it can be overdone. If you asked anyone what they'd give an orangutan to eat, they'd probably say bananas. But bananas are seldom found in the kind of forest the wild orangs frequent. This diet of bananas is deliberately monotonous. It's an effort to persuade them to find more varied foods for themselves in the long hours they spend in the treetops. That's Suka looking after his own interests again. Just occasionally, a wild forest orang gate crashes the tea party. This male apparently does like bananas, at least as a change. Suka is beginning to practice swinging in preparation for the day when he's a wild male, like the banana raider. Such intruders are usually discouraged in case they begin to show dependence on the feeding station. Meanwhile, back on a branch, Suka plays with an older orang. The first arrivals have now had their fill and begin to make their way back to the forest. Being solitary animals, young orangs never get the chance to play like this in the wild. They certainly never meet Jack Russell Terriers like Regina's bitch Vumi. The party lasts about an hour. When all the food has gone, most of the guests depart for the treetops. Suka will be going back in his cage for the night. Some of the free-living youngsters linger around the feeding station. The Swiss scientists have been supervising this unique banquet every day for 3 years. It's their opportunity to check the health of every ape in their charge, as well as its readiness or otherwise for complete rehabilitation. Obviously, this lot have mastered the first essential, traveling through the canopy. There is one last basic requirement. They have to be able to build a nest for the night. Learning this starts very early, even for Suka in his cage. When he's eventually shut up for the night with another young companion, the rangers give them a pile of leaves so that they can practice nest building. Suka has a forceful personality and usually ends up with the lot. Sometimes one of the most difficult jobs for the rehabilitation center is to catch orangs that will eventually end up in the reserve. A message has come that there's a wild male trapped in a timber concession 100 miles away. The orang must be caught and transferred immediately, since the trees there are coming down fast. Regina's plan is to isolate the orang in one large tree. Shaking and throwing down branches is the limit of aggression orangs normally reach, and only then when sorely pressed. Even his throwing is random, though it may seem to be deliberate. With the felling of the tree on the right, the orang is isolated. Now it's a question of laying siege. The homemade nylon nets are laid around the base of the tree. Regina demonstrates what she expects from her catching crew when and if the orang decides to come down. The tactic now is to try to get a man up above the ape. When the orang goes out on a limb, this is the climber's chance to get above him. A member of the catching team has reached a vantage point. He's isolated himself on a liana, a thick creeper, hanging from the main trunk. He knows there's a man above him and many men down below. Even in what must be a terrifying situation, this powerful young male doesn't struggle or fight. Regina has already given him a shot of tranquilizer. His magnificent tree will now be cut down like all the rest, like far too many other trees all over Borneo and Sumatra. He'll be taken to Bohorok and let go in the reserve, where he can live out his life secure from buzzsaws, axes, and the wholesale destruction by the timber companies. When a batch of orangutans is ready for return to the wild, they're released 15 miles from the station. That's enough to stop them finding their way back to become dependent again. The only way to travel is up, and often in the river, with the orangs in crates. The forest is far too thick for anyone to walk through it. Every 100 yards or so, the jungle closes in on one bank, and the party has to wade. The current is strong, and the bottom is treacherously slippery. With an average of 15 crossings per mile, it's an exhausting process. The Indonesian helpers somehow manage to stay upright on bare feet. But on one journey, the porters didn't stay on their feet, and a mishap nearly cost the orang its life. By pure good luck, the crate didn't sink. The occupant, a 4-year-old called Ujok, emerged wet but remarkably composed. After the accident, Regina decided that they could no longer risk making releases by the river route. Another way would have to be found. They reached the release point without further trouble, and Ujok gratefully climbed a convenient creeper towards a new life of freedom. Some months later, when the next party of 8 orangs was ready, Bohorok Rehabilitation Center hired a helicopter to carry the orangs to their new home. There was nowhere to land close to the station, and so the apes had to be carried a mile or so outside the reserve. But first there was that river to cross. Orangs don't like water and decline to cross even a stream, let alone a river. Their fear of water is what makes the river such an effective boundary to the reserve. Regina reassures him, perhaps for the last time in his life, and the crossing is attempted again. The boat finally makes the crossing with the quietly terrified passengers. This time, it's Monica Borner who's in charge of the release operation. Her husband, a scientist who is studying the rare Sumatran rhino far out in the jungle, has cut and marked out a helicopter landing pad at the release point. These two orangs are the quietest of the party. The other 6 will travel in crates. To save room in the helicopter, this pair will fly on Monica's knee, but inside Sachs for safety. Perhaps they feel more secure that way. It's an expensive undertaking to return just 8 orangutans to the forest. During the girls' entire 3 years at Bahorok, the total released has been fewer than 30. The other Sumatran centre at Ketambe, run by Dutch scientists, has achieved much the same results. In Borneo, there are stations at Sepilok and Kalimantan. But when the world population of an animal is down to a probable total of only 10,000, the release of every orang counts, provided that the primary forest in which the orangs live can be kept. In the reserve, this seems certain, if only because much of it is mountainous and unsuitable for logging. Monica Borner would say that the work of rehabilitation centres is very worthwhile, not only because they supplement shrinking wild populations, but because the attention they have attracted has made the illegal trading in captured orangs much harder. And this, arguably, is their greatest achievement for conservation. The apes have all been unloaded. Monica stays behind to make the releases and ensure that the orangs get away to a good start. The passengers are understandably getting restless, but they will soon have the freedom of the forest. One of the disappointing things about these releases is that it's impossible to follow the apes in their freedom. Even if a radio transmitter could be put on them, it would be impossible to follow their signals on foot. The jungle is too thick. And there's no way an orang could be persuaded to wear a larger transmitter traceable by an aircraft or satellite. So it's largely an act of faith, though some of the released orangs have been spotted close to the river. Perhaps a little sadly, Monica watches them for the last time before they disappear. Clowns, acrobats, first cousins to man. It doesn't matter how you look at these men of the forest, they're certainly contenders for the title of the most endearing animals on Earth. The work of rehabilitation centres like Bohorok has brought home not only what we are losing, but what we must do to keep the few orangs that are left. It is up to the governments of Indonesia and Malaysia and the outside helpers they seem to welcome to ensure that the man of the forest will still have a forest left to live in.